In the spring, at the time when the kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "She is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." Then David sent his messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanliness. Then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were doing, and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah, at the entrance of the palace, with all of his master's servants, did not go down to his house. David was told Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to him, "Stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In it, he wrote, "Put Uriah out in front where the fighting is the fiercest, then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die." So while Joab and the city under siege, he put Uriah at the place where he knew the strongest defenders were. When the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. This is the word of God for the people of God.
I'm telling Josh Lyman about a friend who just got his pilot's license. He told me the most remarkable thing. He said a new pilot will fly into cloud cover. There'll be no visibility. And they'll check their gauges, they'll look at the artificial horizon, they'll show them level, but they won't trust it. So they'll make an adjustment, and then another. He said the number of new pilots who fly out of clouds completely upside down would knock you out. You keep your eyes on the horizon, Mr. President.
Keep your eye on the horizon. So H talked last week, and then when they get back in 2 weeks, then he'll follow up with 2 more sermons in his sermon series. And his bottom line for that sermon series is your direction, not your intention, determines your destination. Now, my sermon today and the one I'll follow up with next week aren't really a part of his series, but I wanted to kind of stay in the same area. And when I was listening to his sermons last week, a story popped into my head when he started talking about things that kind of grab our attention. And the story was the story of David and Bathsheba. But I think first we need to know a little bit about David. So who was David? So, a little backstory, right? So Saul is anointed by God to be the king. But after a time, God loses favor with Saul, because Saul isn't following really in the direction in which God had planned for him. Now Samuel still has hope. He's holding out hope that Saul can turn this around. And God comes down to Samuel and he says, it's not going to happen. Saul's not going to turn this around. We need to anoint a new king. Go to Bethlehem. Go to Jesse. Take your horn filled with oil, and I will tell you who to anoint. So Samuel goes to Jesse, and he tells him that he's there to anoint one of his sons. So Jesse brings in his oldest son. And right away, Samuel's like, this has got to be the one I'm here to anoint. I mean, he was big, he was strong, he was handsome. He had the look of a king. But God reminds Samuel, don't be deceived by the outer. It's the inner that is the most important. So they go through this process where Jesse trots out each one of his sons. And each one looking strong and healthy and handsome. Each one, Samuel thinks, this must be the one. And Jesse brings out 7 of his sons have gone before Samuel, and still God is saying, nope, that's not the one. So Samuel turns to Jesse and he's like, do you have any more sons? And he's like, yeah, the youngest one, he's out in the field with the sheep. Samuel says, we will wait. Bring him to me. So this young boy comes in, not looking much like you would think a king would look. And God tells Samuel, that's the one. That's the one who should be anointed and will become king. Samuel anoints David, Jesse's 8th son. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. But, as so happens often, when one king starts to rise, another starts to falter. And God had taken his favor from Saul. So Saul's life started to become difficult for him. And someone in Saul's court thought that perhaps music, they could find somebody who could play music that would soothe Saul when he would get in these fits. So, as things happen, we all know, I know a boy who knows a boy, somebody's nephew's brother, so-and-so, ooh, he plays music, right? So it's one of those kinds of things. And they bring David to Saul's court. And when Saul gets agitated and he gets in these fits where he can't calm himself, David plays music. Saul falls in love with David, loves him, wants him to be at the court, even goes to Jesse and says, I want to bring your son into my court. So then we move forward a little bit, and he's a little older. He's still playing music in the court for Saul. And we have 2 rival armies now. We have the Israelites on one hill and the Philistines on another. And there's a valley between them. And there's this great warrior on the side of the Philistines. And he has this idea. I am the strongest person. So let's just get this war over. I will fight your best soldier. And whoever wins, wins. So for 40 mornings and 40 nights, Goliath stands on their side of the hill, shouting over to the Israelites, taunting them. Come on, send your best guy on over. I will defeat him. We will win this war. The Israelites and Saul, they're terrified of Goliath, and no one will take him up on his offer. They're all too afraid. So David, who isn't at war, but his brothers are, so he goes to visit his brothers and bring them some food and, kind of check in on them and see how his brothers are doing. He hears what this soldier is doing. And he's incensed. He can't believe, how dare someone from that army call us out? We're God's army. We have God's favor on our side. Why are you allowing Goliath to run his mouth? Why isn't anyone doing anything? So he goes to Saul and he says, I will take on Goliath. So, not too sure about that, but they figure, what do we have to lose? He's the only one who stepped forward. So they take this skinny, scrawny kid, and Saul starts putting his battle armor on David. And just to kind of give you perspective, let's say, I picked on Dax last night. So imagine taking Dax and his Hawaiian shirt, right? And then putting that Hawaiian shirt on Brady. So can you kind of figure Brady in this big Hawaiian shirt, it's going to hang to his knees. He's going to look. So that's what David was looking like in this battle armor. He couldn't move. He was encumbered by the weight and the size of it. And he shrugs it all off. And he's like, I'm going as I am. He picks up a handful of river rocks, puts them in a pouch, and he goes out. One shot hits Goliath. Goliath drops like a stone. And then he uses Goliath's own sword and he cuts his head off. Well, the Philistines are looking at the smallest, weakest person from the other army just took out their biggest guy, and they're out. And the Israelites, they're overjoyed. They can't believe what they just saw. They just saw this little boy take on somebody 3 times his size without fear. What they didn't understand was that David had God on his side. And he believed it from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. He believed in the power of God. So as David grows and grows up and moves up the ranks, his favor with God just makes him unstoppable. But when you're king and you watch a young boy grow, bigger, bigger, right? And people are talking about how great David is. And Saul, he becomes jealous. And he gets to the point where he can't handle it any longer, and he plans to kill David. And then we have some time where it's kind of a cat and mouse kind of a thing, where Saul's trying to find David and David's hiding from Saul. And then to top it all off, Saul's oldest son, Jonathan, is helping David, so that really gets under Saul's collar, really gets him fired up, because now not only is he trying to kill David, but his son is helping David, and it just is more and more. Twice, David had an opportunity. He got close enough to Saul that he could have killed him, but he chose not to. Because even though Saul had fallen off the path in which God had hoped for him, he had been anointed by God. And David's principles would not allow him, his moral compass would not allow him to take Saul's life. Though Saul had lost favor with God, he had once had it, and that was enough for David. And so he had shown Saul a couple of times, I was this close. I could have taken your life and I spared you. But it didn't make a difference for Saul. He just kept coming. Eventually Saul is killed, not by David. And David becomes king. Now, H also shared with us last week that our attention influences our direction. What catches our eye can take us off of the path. And I think that we are all a little like David. I don't mean that all of us in here are adulterers and murderers. I'm assuming that none of you have done that. So, just blanket statement. I'm pretty sure nobody in here has killed anybody. All right, good. So you're already, 10 steps ahead of David. That's great. But it just shows you that one small step. It only takes one little falter. David allowed himself to fall deeper and deeper into sin. And he used his royal power to satisfy his own personal needs. H talked a little bit last week about this giant wind chime, right? And he kept driving back and forth to Illinois, and he would pass this sign about this wind chime, right? And so eventually his mom was with him. I don't know. I think he probably just is a big burly guy who doesn't really want to admit that he went to see a wind chime. But, all right, his mom was with him. So they sidestepped, they saw it, but then they got right back on their path and they hit their destination. And sometimes we all make missteps. And it can be something just very small. You sidestep here, you realize, okay, and then you come back, right? But that's not what David did. David just kept falling deeper and deeper. So it was springtime, it was time for war, but David didn't go. David remained in Jerusalem. He abandoned his purpose by staying home from war. He focused on his own desires. So I guess if you'd want to look at it as steps, that would have been step one. Because had he gone, he's the king, but he's the leader of his army. Had he gone off to war with his troops, he would have never saw Bathsheba. This slippery slope would not have started. But he spots her. He's up on the rooftop and he spots her. He saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. Now, right here is where he could have, it's a simple, you're out, you're walking around, you see something you're not intending to see, he could have, little peek and then went the opposite direction. And then that could have been the end of it. And he could have been right back on the path that God had laid out for him. Here where intent comes in, because he gets intentional about his sin. He sent someone to find out about her. When temptation came, he looked into it instead of turning away from it. He sinned deliberately. He sent someone. That's intentional. And then when they came back and they said, she's the wife of Uriah, at that point, he could have said, oh, she's married. Way to go, Uriah, right? But he didn't. He could have got himself right back on the path. He takes it another step. David sent messengers to get her. She came to him. He slept with her. And then he sent her back home. Right? So he thinks it's over. Little sidestep, now, okay, try to work my way back onto the path. Well, complications arise once you start heading off of that path. Complication. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. Oops. Now what? Because now there's proof that he did something that he should not have done. So now he's got to try to cover up. How do I cover this up? So he sends word to Joab, and he says, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Uriah comes back. Now, he's trying to cover this up, because Uriah has no idea why he's being called back, right? So David's like, how are you doing? How's Joab? Is he leading the troops good? You got enough food? Are you guys warm enough? Enough clean water? He's just kind of shooting the breeze with Uriah, trying to, plan this. And then he says, you guys are doing great. Go home, visit your wife, does the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, visit your wife. But he finds out that Uriah doesn't go home. So he asks Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? But Uriah says, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents. My commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go home? So David, now he's got to think quick on his feet, because now he's like, oh, what am I doing? I'm still trying to follow through with this cover-up. So David invites him. He says, stay, and I'll send you back tomorrow. So he offers him food and wine, and he gets him drunk. Because he's hoping that if he gets him drunk, Uriah will stumble home and sleep with his wife. Then he can pass off the child as Uriah's. Complication. Uriah is too dedicated a soldier. He can't control Uriah's principles. He can't control somebody else's moral compass. So now, what do I do? So David writes a letter to Joab, and he sends it with Uriah. So now I have a question to ask you. If that tree out there is the destination, that's what I'm going for, that's where God wants me, right? And I've taken all of these side steps, and I'm way over here. How far over there do I have to be to send a note with the person I want to kill? He gives the actual orders to have Uriah killed with Uriah. How far off of the path does your mentality have to work for that to be okay? And we're talking about a man who had principles. Saul chased after David, and David would not take Saul's life. So he tells Joab to put Uriah in a place where the strongest defenders, where the fierce fighting was. He committed murder to continue the cover-up. Another complication arises. Other innocent lives are now lost in an ill-advised military tactic. God's anointed king has become an agent of death. Self-interests have led David into a deadly chain of events. And if we look at the rest of 1 Samuel chapter 11, you'll see that Joab now has to send word back to David that soldiers were killed. He knows David is going to get angry. And he tells the messenger, the king is going to become angry when he hears of the loss. But just tell him, Lord, your servant Uriah has died. So the messenger goes, and David, just as he was told, he gets fired up. That people were lost, that lives were lost. The messenger says, your servant Uriah died. David immediately calms down and says, oh, okay. Go back, tell Joab, you know what? In war, people die. What started off as just a small, simple mistake, a simple viewing of someone he shouldn't have saw. Instead of turning away, he started down a path. And this goes into chapter 12, where God sends Nathan to see David. The truth is that the thing David had done displeased the Lord greatly. Now, David and Bathsheba, they try to kind of cover up. Uriah passes, and after her time of mourning, he brings her in and they become married. But God is displeased with David. Nathan comes and he confronts David. And he shares the consequences of David's sins. David's sins are far-reaching. He didn't only hurt himself. He hurt Bathsheba. Uriah is dead. Other soldiers' lives were lost. The child that Bathsheba was carrying ends up dying. All as consequences to a sin that David started. Me and Andrew, we went to Gary and, well, no, we did not. Sorry. We did not go on purpose to Gary, Indiana. I apologize if anybody's here from Gary, Indiana, but a couple years ago, we went to Minnesota. My son and his wife live in Minnesota, and we went to visit. I think it was the bridal shower before the wedding. And so I don't like to drive on big 6-lane highways, and there was no way I was going anywhere near Chicago. So we figured we'll take 2 days and we'll do a scenic route. So we do that, just me and Andrew. We're having fun. It's beautiful. I think it was in September, October. Yeah, okay, so it was one of the 2 months. Yeah, I know, thanks. So it was September, October. It was beautiful. The leaves were turning. We had a great time. We get there. We had a great time visiting. On the way back, though, Andrew doesn't want to take 2 days to get home. And I'm not driving near Chicago. So we're like, what are we going to do? So we decide we're going to try and still kind of go the similar way that we came, but instead of taking back roads, we're going to take major highways. So I was really thrilled about that. So we stop at, it's late in the evening, it's dark out, we stop, we're going to grab some food, and we're just going to drive through. Well, I don't know if anybody knows this about me, but I have a horrible, horrible sense of direction. Like, literally can get turned around in a building. So Andrew's my navigator, and I took a wrong turn somewhere, and by this time it's like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, so it's pitch black out, and we find ourselves in Gary, Indiana. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever driven through Gary, Indiana, but I can't imagine that it's good during the daylight, and I apologize for people in Gary, Indiana, but it was terrifying at 11 o'clock at night, right? So I make this wrong turn, and now I'm in somewhere where I really don't want to be. And I'm like, okay, and I'm trying not to freak out, because I don't want to freak him out, right? Because I'm the mom, I'm the parent, I'm supposed to be calm and cool and collected. So I'm like, okay, navigate us out of here. And so he gets on his phone and he's messing, and while he's doing that, while he's trying to figure out where we are, I just continue to make turns, right? I have no idea where I'm going. So I get to this point where I turn and I get down, and as soon as my car made the complete turn and I could see where we were, I thought, I can't say what I thought because I'm in church, but it was a 4-letter word. And
oops.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, I watch Criminal Minds. I've seen CSI. This is where you dump bodies. I've seen this episode in Criminal Minds, It was not good. It was like an alley. There was garbage. There was like bagged garbage. There was just garbage thrown everywhere. It was not even like a real road. So I'm starting to sweat because I'm thinking, we're not making it out of Gary, Indiana alive, So finally, I'm going, I'm driving, and I can honestly tell you that's probably the most terrified I've ever been in my life, because I thought for sure, I thought for sure we were the next episode of, 48 Hours. So I'm driving down this, and it's not very long, it's not very wide, and I'm driving, and I'm just praying that this kid can navigate us out of here. And next thing I know, he goes, oh, turn here. So I'm like, so I follow his direction. And within 2 turns, he had us at this on-ramp and getting back onto the highway, right? Where I'm going with this is that it was so simple for us, for me. I took a wrong turn, and then I didn't know what to do, so I took another wrong turn, and I took another wrong turn, and then I took another wrong turn. Sometimes in our lives, circumstances end us up in a place where you really, really don't want to be. And so I have to ask a question. How far out of your way do you need to go before you realize you need to turn around? Because if I had, after that first turn off, if I had just stopped and turned around, we could have got right back on, and I would have been right back on the path where we were supposed to be. But I just kept taking wrong turn after wrong turn after wrong turn. Thankfully, I had a great navigator, and he navigated us out of there, but not before I nearly, had a heart attack. Now, I have to tell you that you may not like this, but I'm going to leave you with that question. And you have to come back next Sunday if you want